Welcome to Talmudic Treasures. Today we're learning Subos page 110, which discusses that when two people get married and they're discussing where they should live, if they're both from a particular city, one person cannot force the other to move to a completely different area, which is quite different from what they're used to. Not only in the event that they're from, let's say, a large town in which they have a lot of things that is accessible to them, shops, marketplaces, that you can't say, let's move to some small little city, because that's changing that person's lifestyle, and you can't force your spouse to go into that type of a situation. But even the Talmud says the other way around, that if a person would move to a big city, that's perhaps something which, even though there's a lot of things at your fingertips, that doesn't necessarily mean that's a life that that person wants. And the Talmud also discusses, how about if you say, let's move to a nicer neighborhood? So there's even opinion that says that you cannot compel your spouse to move to a nicer neighborhood, to a nicer house. And the question is, why not? So the Talmud actually says is that the problem is that if you move to a much nicer place where all of a sudden people may be watching you and looking at every single thing that you do, therefore it causes a higher level of stress, to the point that the Talmud says that it can actually cause stomach ailments. There could be problems, which perhaps refers to anxiety, that you feel this additional pressure of having to live up to such high standards based on this new neighborhood where all these very affluent people are living in and perhaps watching everything that you do. Not only that, the Talmud talks about moving from one country to the next, specifically to Israel. We know there's a concept of making aliyah, where many people decide to leave their country and move to Israel. What happens if you have one person, a husband or a wife, one of them is quite adamant that they should move to Israel, the other one says no? So, first of all, you would hope that they would eventually see eye to eye. But that is enough of a reason that if one person says no, that if that marriage possibly should not last anymore, they could walk away from that marriage. And if it's the man that says no, the woman could demand her ksuba. And if the woman is the one that said, no, I don't want to move to Israel, then she actually would lose her ksuba. The Talmud tells us that it doesn't make any difference, even if they'd be moving to maybe not as nice of a neighborhood. But the fact that they're moving to Israel, that in itself has tremendous value. So much so, the Talmud here says, an unbelievable statement, that an individual that goes and lives in Israel, it's like they have a god. However, if they live outside of Israel, then they do not have a god. And it says it's even better to live in a city in Israel, even if there's not so many fellow worshipers in that neighborhood, but you're still in the great holy country of Israel, than to live in the diaspora outside of Israel, even if you're surrounded by devout religious people, which it certainly teaches us many, many lessons. First of all, the notion of the power of living in Israel, the importance and the beauty of those individuals that decide to make aliyah, to move to Israel. But it also teaches us how important it is when it comes to marriage. Before you get married, this is something that certainly should be discussed. Is that something that you would consider? Would you ever consider moving to Israel? Would you consider moving to a bigger city, to a smaller city? These are seemingly obvious things that often people just don't talk about. And it's so important when it comes to the courting time of a relationship. Before a person gets married, they should already know that person's goals and ambitions and understand what the parameters are, what they're comfortable with and what they're not. And by knowing up front and communicating, you'll know exactly who you're marrying to alleviate any of these potential issues.